Hello, online people.
Yeah, we can't see you, but
Yeah. Hopefully you can see us better than we can see
I
you.
don't know, who is that?
We're about,
We can see you.
yeah,
Lucky
we're about half and half. People
Oh,
online,
okay.
people in person, so that's pretty good. I hope you can hear us okay.
Mhm.
Feel free to jump in anytime. This is our first time, so it might get a little awkward here and there, but we'll wing it.
Practically giddy, isn't
I
it?
was just gonna use that exact same word. I feel kind of giddy. And to see your smile.
And isn't it nice that I was at the grocery store and I smiled on the way out? Because you don't have to say anything to anybody. You can just smile.
Smile,
Right? You know
yeah.
what I mean? When
Yeah.
I'm out of here. Thanks.
Right.
That's enough. It is.
Mhm. That is one awkward thing, like when you're wearing your mask, you don't feel the facial
Your facial
expressions.
cues are
You
gone.
just-
I hope my eyes crinkle.
Yeah, but I've noticed that you can tell from someone's eyes.
Yeah.
They smile.
Right, yes, yes.
If it's just a smile here, it doesn't make it up there.
Yeah.
Run away from that person.
They said lipstick sales without you.
Why would anyone do that?
Yeah, that was my
Makeup
one
in
concession
general,
today.
yeah.
We wore it. I used to wear it.
All right, so on to the gown. So I first have a question. Any royal fans here? I know there's a few. I know there's a few. I know there's a couple online. Yes, yes.
Who is talking? We can't see the person who's talking.
I'm sorry. You can't. If you see me, you can't see everybody else. So
We have a British
Okay.
royal here.
Yeah. So those that are fans, do you get into the royal weddings? Do you watch them all? Do you? You got up at 4 to watch them. I feel like I'm shouting. So. Who else? I know Jane is.
I am a big fan. I so enjoy the Royals, but mostly I look at photos rather than get up at 4 a.m. But I just love it. It's just so strange, that whole lifestyle, especially compared to me. But anyway, it's just fun. I enjoy it.
Watch The Crown. When Diana got married many, many years ago,
Yeah.
I had a friend that had a party and it was at 5 in the morning and we all had to wear a wedding dress. Oh, and it was a hoot. 'Cause some people had theirs like strapped on because they didn't fit them anywhere and stuff like that. So it was funny.
Oh, that's.
That's hilarious. What a great idea. That's
Yeah.
really hilarious.
Yeah.
My cleaning lady is from England and her husband has a suit with the flag pattern.
Oh.
And she watches everything and they're going back in September. I'm so sad because she's going back after 22 years.
Oh, wow. Like permanently.
Yeah,
Yeah.
her family is still there. And she-
I have
I'd like to ask a question, especially of you people who like the Royals.
Yeah.
I do not. I mean, it's not that I don't like them, they're lovely people, but what I'd like to understand is why the English people continue to support the monarchy. I mean, it's ungodly amounts of money. And they spend ungodly amounts of money. And yes, they do their little charitable things, but I don't understand why they continue to support them at the monetary level that they do. It's a good
I
question.
don't know.
No.
When I was younger, I thought, oh, they don't do anything. They should be stripped of all their powers and money and made to work.
Well, yes, I agree. I mean, yes, they do some things, but just the amount of money I can't imagine to keep Balmora and when, all their living spaces alone. In fact, wasn't there just something about Andrew and, he's kind of a scumbag.
They employ a lot of people. They employ a lot of people.
I have to say that
Okay.
watching the Crown on TV made me think they were just the most miserable people. That's how I felt after watching that. And of course, it's a TV series, but just the way the children were treated and the way anyone who wasn't in their fold was treated, just seemed like they were miserable people.
I wonder how much it has to do with the fact that it's such an
history and tradition and to kind of move away from that, I would think would take some time. You know what I mean? Because it's been in existence for so long. And how they feel about, and I don't really know how much money goes to them, whether it's still the same amount that it was 10 years ago, or whether they have been cutting.
Huge.
Or do they make good investments?
Or
They got great 401ks. I'm sure they do, you know? So they're supporting themselves with their 401ks.
Right.
that would be a
Trust fund is
huge change
yeah.
for that.
I love the name of the marketplace on PR, the footsie. That's what they always said, the footsie.
We can't hear all of that conversation, just to let you know that we can only hear when, if you're talking quietly to each other, we can't hear you.
Yeah, this might get a little awkward. We'll try to speak up and hopefully you have your volume up to hear us.
All right, we've heard everything. I heard everything except the very last person that was
Oh,
talking.
the footsie I was talking about, they call their stock market, at least part of it, the footsie. Now, where does that? Yeah, I hear it on NPR. They're quoting.
I don't know what it stands for, but I imagine it's.
It's Financial Times.
Okay.
Oh, it's
Oh.
Financial Times is what it
It's
stands
the
for.
foot, okay, thank you.
Oh, yeah.
You know what?
You guys, Linda Stanford is trying to answer your question. She has the answer to your question.
Okay.
Yeah, we heard her. We heard her.
Yeah, they heard me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julie.
So the Crown was mentioned too. Have a lot of you read or watched that, watched that, and how is
Crown,
it?
I like the crown.
Yes.
I haven't seen it, but
Victoria.
yeah, Victoria.
Well, this was way less about all of that than
Yeah.
it was the characters anyway,
Yeah,
really.
right.
That's true.
You know, that was just a sideline, really.
Yeah. So how do you think the hype and the preparations for this wedding compared to what we've seen recently of royal weddings?
I don't think it was probably as much.
For
Because
that time, I
don't
think
have
it
the
was a
media.
lot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But
It's just local hype now. It's outside of-
I think now, because of the 24/7 news cycle and all of the 24/7 news cycle and social media. I mean, I have to say, I always marvel at how many headlines have to do with the royals currently. I do often wonder, like, who cares this much about Kate Middleton, and who cares this much about what Meghan and Harry are doing?
They don't.
But clearly, millions and millions and millions of people do care. You know, so.
I don't know. Yeah, the Royals obviously don't want that. They wouldn't mind if that didn't exist. And I don't know how many, if it's more English, Londonese people who care about it, or do Americans also? I don't pay attention to it. So.
I suppose it's no different than all the people who care about Kim Kardashian.
Yeah.
She's in the news every other
Right.
minute.
Oh, she's so yesterday.
Kim Kardashian is harder to understand than the royals.
Yeah.
Less going for her.
If the royals have some credibility and,
History.
Yeah, she.
History.
yeah.
Yes, yeah.
But if
I
anything
think
bad is reported about them, that's all shoved as far as they can put it away and ignored. You know, they couldn't ignore Andrew and his connection with Epstein, but you know, the Queen finally had to make some compensations for that, because people were pretty upset about that. But you know, anytime there was anything that was not good, and of course they were much. I think they could hide things easier, because like you said before, 24/7 media.
Sure, right, but think of all the times that I think Charles's phone calls with Camilla were intercepted, and Diana's phone calls with her boyfriend were intercepted and published and played everywhere to great embarrassment.
They say that Edward, the youngest
I
of the Queen's children, is their favorite.
I think
I do.
I was sure Andrew was your favorite.
He does the right thing. Yeah, he never misbehaves. The rest of them are all over the dollar.
We have a comment from the computer.
Go ahead.
Don't you all think it's interesting that Harry is unmasking a lot of things that are that have gone on? His own mental health issues because of the way he was treated, how things were. He wasn't allowed to grieve. It was all brushed under the rug. How his mother was treated, his resentments about that, the racism that's rampant, and he is still doing his charitable work. He's still dedicated to that. He's created his own foundations. They're earning their own money. They're still doing good works. He just doesn't want to be part of the firm anymore.
Right.
You know, I found that kind of intriguing, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about
You
the
know,
fact that they
I don't
want-
think, you know, I have relatives and friends that live in Great Britain, and they certainly, as silly as they think it is, and as wasteful as it might be, they still have this pride about this is our country. I mean, it's a hard thing for them to let go of. It's like, you know, when you're married to an idiot, you don't let anybody put them down because he's your idiot.
Well,
It's still
part
my
of his
idiot,
history
you
and
know.
tradition.
And
Well
so
said.
I think it's like kind of like that. I mean, when I talk to our friends that, you know, live over there and are from there and live here now, it's very interesting to talk to them about it. So
Well,
I mean,
taking
what would
it-
it be? It would be like our Packers, right? I mean, you know, Aaron Rodgers, you know, he can.
Well, that's true.
Brett Favre, you know, he turned out to be such an ass. You know, but still, the loyalty to Brett Favre was unbelievable. You know, and Aaron Rodgers too, and even the coaches. You know, I mean, just like, and there are pack. It's the pack, you know, come on. So I think we can at least understand it on that level, as silly as it is, and as many millions of dollars as those people are making for, you know, for the work, and what else could be done with that money. We still want that. We still want that pack tradition. So who knows?
So if we take it back to the book, 1947, would you rather be one of the royal family or one of the embroiderers working on the dress? What do you think sounds easier?
I was just going to say in post-war England, I think I'd much rather be a royal.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Was anyone surprised? I mean, I don't know much about British history. Were we surprised to know some of the details of post-war?
I
didn't
know it was so dire still in 47.
Yeah.
But in terms of the food and
Yeah,
the restrictions,
Yeah.
that was interesting. Where's Jane? Is Jane gonna say something?
Jane,
Actually, Jan.
Jan.
Yeah.
go ahead.
So that was exactly what I was thinking, just as you transitioned, Tracy, that we're talking about, you know, why the everyday English. This was the original question that someone posed. I can see you, but I don't know names. The original question, which is why do the English still support the monarchy? And I think we could see that really clearly in the gown. These folks were barely making it, and this dress was going to cost a gazillion dollars, but they were proud. You know, they were proud of Princess Elizabeth, and they were proud to be part of it, and they were excited to turn out for the parade. And that's 1947, and I think it goes back to 1066 and William the Conqueror, and, you know, so it's such a long-standing tradition that even people where we might think, why would you be supporting the monarchy when you are barely scraping by in any era? Well, there's a pride about it. You know, there's just, as you said, you know, Jamie, it's their monarchy, right? It's their monarchy. So there is a fascination with it. And I think we could see it, going back to your question, Tracy, we could see that in the book, that the characters were utterly fascinated with the Queen Mother and Princess Elizabeth and Princess Margaret, and that came across really clearly.
The way the monarchy served through the wars, World War I and World War II, they kind of kept, by example, kept the nation going. They could have left the country, they could have gone to the countryside, but they didn't. They stayed in London.
Yeah.
And that meant so much to the people. I think that came out in the book. I kind of knew that before from other things that I've read. And there were so many things like that. The speeches that were given by the radio that just kept the spirit up of the people. They just respected that so much. They felt they were earning their keep, by doing that. So that was immediately post-war. It's not kind of like now where people going, hey, well, come on, what are you doing now? And they're transitioning. I believe they're transitioning to supporting themselves and having less and less taxpayer support. All of the money that's being given to Harry by Charles, I've read, I think it's a good source, is Charles's money. It's not any government money. It's all Charles's investments, but he, saved his salary and invested well. He owns so much. I think he's one of the biggest landholders in all of Great Britain. Charles is privately.
So after the war, everything was so impoverished, but this wedding was so extravagant. Do you think that was a symbol of anything to the people? What do you think that might have represented?
It's supposed to be a morale lift, I guess.
And maybe it made them feel strong as a country, where they felt they'd been strong during the war, but maybe others saw them as being sort of devastated and all the wreckage and the devastation. But this made them feel like a strong country again, maybe a little bit. That they still had the positive symbol, the positivity. Yeah, maybe that's part of it.
Well, if the crown is to be believed, Elizabeth is actually, in many, many ways, a very sympathetic character, especially young Elizabeth. She meant well, and she always did what, from what I'm looking at when I look at that, she did what she thought she was meant to do, and was somebody people admired.
And I think too, it was a love story. And I think this was just something that people were ready for. Very much a symbol of we're in utter devastation. London is totally trashed. No one has any money or any food, but we can do this. We can put this event forward, and we can shine on the world stage, and we have a love story going on. I just think it struck a chord, it must have, with so many people, that it was, young people moving into the future. I just think it symbolized a lot for people, not just in this book, but it must have.
We lost Jane. Uh-oh.
Just been, I would bet heartwarming. You've got this young monarch who's absolutely in love. I mean, she set her cap for Philip when she was, what, 13?
13.
14.
Wow, really?
Wow. What a great story for people to be just a part of.
I have a question. Does anybody know whether, excuse me, I'm going to sneeze. Excuse me. Does anybody know whether the Heather motif, that little tiny secret Heather good luck thing, is really part of the veil? How much of this is how much of it was truth, and that she built the fictional characters around it? So is everything true about the dress and the veil and all that, or are there some fictional things there? Does anybody know?
I don't know for sure, but I think a lot of the things about the dress are very true. There was a site I looked at today about is his name Hartnell, about that designer, and other gowns he had designed had similar embroideries on the gowns. And And there was another designer that some people think the character was based on that used to hide things in their designs. So I don't know for sure about the Heather, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was true. And it'd be an interesting thing to research.
Certainly made a theme throughout the book with even the character being named Heather.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was like almost the end of the book before I got that, like.
Oh my God, me too. Oh, that's why.
Yes,
Felt
so silly.
Yeah, I just looked, one's a flower, some people say, and the other one.
And the author is I did a lot of research. I would be surprised if she included that as a fiction item, but we'd have to look at it.
Did anyone read the little bit in the back? I don't know if each book had that. Yeah. With the interview with the author, and she kind of talked about how she's such a historian that it really kind of bothered her to have to kind of fictionalize some of this. So yeah, I'm sure she did a lot of research, but we'll never know. Doctor, I guess, which parts were true or not. Although she did say that having each person at the embroidery
true.
put
Yeah.
in a stitch, that was
I
true.
thought that was so neat.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah. So everybody could say they worked on
Very
it.
thoughtful too.
Yeah.
I have a question, actually, of everyone. I really liked the book a lot. I enjoyed reading it. It certainly held my interest, and I found the three main characters to be very appealing. But I also had the reaction that style of jumping around from narrator to narrator and jumping around in time has really become such a cliche.
Yeah, I agree. Every other book you read.
Right.
Pretty
Yes.
common.
And I keep going back, like, what city are they in now?
Yeah, that was,
I felt real dumb.
Jan, that was actually one of my questions too. Do we feel, I mean, it is kind of overused these days. Does it work for this novel, or are people tired of it?
Oh, I think.
It had to be that way in this novel. I mean, it had to move the story this way, back and forth.
I think it worked for this book.
I think it often works. I just think it's become so overused.
Yeah.
You know, so often now, I mean, I don't know the last time that I picked up a book of fiction that was just linear through time. You know, where it was, or one omniscient narrator or one main character. And I didn't dislike the book because of it, but I just thought, wow, I feel as though this is really a prevalent style now.
Do you find that's true more in historical novels or even in non-historical novels?
That's an interesting question, actually.
Yeah. I think one of the reasons why I thought it worked, and I agree with you, it's been so overused, but I think one of the things it did in this book was move forward the mystery aspect, because without the present day, you didn't realize there was any mystery. You kind of thought things just went along as they did, and it wasn't until Heather showed up that you knew there was some mystery about why she moved to Canada, her grandmother.
Yeah, if it didn't jump back and forth in time, you pretty much wouldn't be able to have the 2016 Heather story.
Right.
And that would take out like you said, the mystery of it. Be a completely different book.
I sometimes find it tiresome because I feel like they just ramble a little bit too much.
Yeah.
Too much, each one has to tell their story. And so like you said, when you're jumping around here, it's like, oh, can we just get on with it? I'm sorry. I wasn't enamored with it.
I read one book, and I can't remember which group it was with, fairly recently, well, before the pandemic. And it was back and forth like this. and it was women who were acted as spies, I think, in World War I.
Oh,
Ring a
yeah,
bell
one
with
of
anybody?
those. Yeah, there was so
There's been
many.
several.
And I
Yeah.
just, I broke down and I read all the past ones and then I read all the present chapters. And I liked it a lot better.
That was a lot of pages, but yeah.
Interesting.
I didn't do it for this one, but
Yeah. I
That
have
would
a- I have
never
another-
occur to me.
She's a rebel, rebel reader.
I have another question.
Yeah.
Did anybody have trouble with the fact that she didn't stay in touch with Miriam?
Yes.
I didn't buy into that. I think that was a weak point, a weak spot in the book for me. I just couldn't see, she wouldn't be that fearful that if she wrote a letter to her dearest friend that this guy would find her.
Yeah.
Or anything. And she already had told her that he was gone out of the country. He wasn't going to be chasing her. So why she didn't stay in touch with her, or why she didn't do any more embroidery?
Yeah,
You
I
know,
agree.
Or that was all part of the PTSD, the trauma of it, that she just had to, you know, like Miriam had fear of dogs, maybe she had fear of embroidery. I mean, you know, associated with that. I don't know, but I could maybe kind of buy into that, but I just couldn't buy the letting the friendship just go.
Well,
by the
especially
wayside.
especially after she went to the exhibit in 1997.
Yeah.
I mean, so then she certainly could have got into contact.
Right.
I do think we have to some extent lost sight of how shameful it was to get pregnant out of wedlock.
Yes, exactly. The
You know,
morality
and
difference. Yeah.
how ashamed she was of herself to have been so naive. And I agree, Jamie, that no contact seemed very fictional. I mean, I think it was, you know, part of what moved the story along, but it would just have been the Scarlet Letter, even though that's obviously a lot before 1947, but yeah.
But you know, Miriam didn't try real hard either. You know, a friendship is two people, and so Miriam, based on what we're reading here, really didn't try very hard either to keep in contact. She knew that she were sisters, you know, type of thing. So she could have done a little bit more too, I think. I don't know.
Well, do you think, given the time that this was, do you think Anne's only choice was to leave and go to Canada? Do you think, was that the right decision?
Well, it was a secure decision because she had someone she could live with and help take care of the child.
And
It
she
would have been really hard for her to do it on her own if she had stayed in London and she didn't burden Miriam. And she didn't want her friends to know. So,
she could pretend to be a widow in Canada. She couldn't pretend to be a widow in London. And so
And she also,
yeah,
she was also worried that if he found out, he could claim the child.
Yeah, right.
That's true. Wasn't he a jerk?
Oh, yeah.
You know, the juxtaposition of that, most of us had finished the novel, and of course his entire the rapist's entire motive was to try to get information. And then just a week or two ago, more information came out about the person who worked for the BBC who tricked Princess Di.
Yes.
Princess
Yeah.
Who was a jerk also then, wasn't he?
Yeah, Martin Bashir. I was shocked.
BBC covered for him, and that's a lot later than 1947.
Yeah.
As I read about that, and I don't remember his name.
Martin Bashir.
That table
He worked
knows.
for
That
ABC.
guy, that guy, that it's like, well, how much changed in 50 years when it comes to getting the scoop on anybody famous, but particularly a royal? Nothing had changed. Crazy.
Well, I thought it was weird that he worked in the royal area there, you know, like, and so like, I don't know, could have had access to a lot more information, I would have thought, but yeah, he didn't work the right channel, I don't think.
Mhm. Were you surprised that there was so much secrecy around the dress? That seemed.
That seemed right.
Yeah.
When you look at Princess Di's gown now. Oh, this
Right.
is red.
Right.
Yeah, I never-
All those
But at the
sleeves.
time, I think it was
Oh.
very
Yeah.
in style.
Now it's all the.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Now it's
I-
all the-
I
I
found
have to watch The Crown and see the scene where Elizabeth and Philip are married.
Oh.
You know, I watched season 1 a long time ago, and so actually we just kind of powered through the seasons. But it would be interesting now to go back and find
Right, that
episode
episode.
and see what the dress looks like, I think.
I think this,
Oh, hello,
I-
Beth.
I think the secrecy is still there. Look at the secrecy around Kate Middleton's dress. I think they even had some bogus gowns that they were floating, not the full gown, but the design,
Mhm.
just to keep it a secret. You know, otherwise, even in today's world especially, but even back then, everybody picks it apart ahead of time. There's no surprise, there's no just enjoying the revelation, the reveal of such a special dress in terms of who's getting married. But
Right.
I think that's one of the great similarities between today's royal weddings and this one is that absolute feel, whether or not they need to keep secrecy surrounding the details and the dresses, so that it's not exposed and over picked on and, you know, taken apart, torn apart ahead of time.
Right.
You know, it's a pageant and they want to control the pageantry.
Yeah.
So it is a pageant, and one way to keep it a pageant is to control the timing. And so I think it's very much part of still today.
Well,
Would
I
you like
think
that job though, to
designers
be
want
the one
that
that works
too.
on the fake design? So, did the book do a good job of describing this? Could you picture the embroidery? Picture them working on it? Was there anything about the process that kind of surprised you or anything?
So tedious.
Oh,
Yeah.
So.
I'm sorry. what?
We're talking about the tediousness of embroidery.
I didn't quite get the applique first, and then the embroidery on top of the applique, and then the pearls and the sequins. I get the embroidery and the pearls and the sequins. I just didn't quite get the applique underneath it. So I would have liked to see
Yeah.
somehow
You can
pictures or
go
photos.
online and see close-ups of all of this. That's what
that's
I
what I need
was
to
so
do.
interested in. I kind of went online and took a look at the dress and the veil and blew it up and looked closely. And I was looking for the little Heather thing, but I didn't find it.
It's on the train, not the veil, the train.
Mhm.
My Amish ladies do an applique and they spend hours and they do this one little.
wow.
Because I've been on one, it's just.
It's hard to imagine how much time.
Their eyes, just.
And I was surprised that there was wheat. Like that doesn't sound like very glamorous to put wheat in the design.
I think they wanted to have a lot of British symbols. Yeah, so it must be a symbol.
Maybe it was because they were starving.
No, it probably meant fertility.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure all of those were symbolic, or most of those were symbolic of something.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, sitting and embroidering for 12 hours a day.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Get arthritis later.
Yeah.
It wasn't 12 hours a day.
Oh, yeah.
8:30 to 5.
Yeah.
They were not working around the clock.
They did work overtime.
I just feel like that this was a place that was pretty good for people.
Yeah.
It sounded like it, yeah.
And there were other things.
Yeah, he was a good guy.
Do you have any idea what they were actually paid?
You know, I don't think much. I don't remember where I saw it, but I think it was, yeah, it's kind of a minimum job,
Yeah.
sadly. It was pretty important. But
How much the dress?
right, yeah.
It really was yet another reminder, and I'm sure we've all been reading so many books along these lines. For example, Giver of Stars would be another example of how hungry and cold and deprived people are in so many parts of the world in so many historical times. And we have everything we need all the time. It's really, it's to me always such a, it's not a stunning reminder, it's just such a solid reminder of not taking bounty for granted.
We're kind of like royalty.
Well,
Yeah, we're
yeah.
kind of like royalty
Yeah.
with that, you know, compared to the rest of the world.
Last year, we were complaining about the, what do they call that, they couldn't move the goods fast enough.
Oh, yes.
The Supply chain,
Supply chain,
Yeah.
that's fun, you know, never.
Give it a break, yeah.
Yeah.
But imagine how she had to, what she had to go through to find an orange, and it wasn't even
Yeah.
a really good
Yeah.
orange for that
Yeah.
recipe.
Oh,
Yeah.
It also, you mentioned the salary, it also reminded me of how many things are created or built by people who are not probably paid a whole lot, or who are forgotten or are never mentioned. But, you know, these guys that built the skyscrapers in New York back in the 20s and 30s, and the bridges and the railroads, and these are
Subways.
major important things and
Yeah, dangerous
accomplishments,
jobs.
and they're not thought about. It's
Right.
just the
The design.
end result, or the guy who paid for the whole
Right,
thing. or-
yeah.
Yeah. So it was kind of fun to see the story bring forward all these women and I guess, you know, the designers. I mean, I don't know if there are any other men involved. Giving them notice about what they did.
So
It was also interesting how Miriam became such an accomplished and sought after artist. And they talked about how whenever she was interviewed, nobody even mentioned the fact that she worked in this embroidery workshop, because that was considered to be such a throwaway thing now that she was a big famous art person. I just thought that was a very interesting thing, and how telling that was. I'm sure that happens quite a bit with artists who become very, very well known.
Mhm.
So Miriam's
I
things
think
aren't
too,
real, are they?
there was sort of a secondary theme or a motif running through here, and I think that illustrates it perfectly, the difference between craft and art.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Crafts almost always are considered having a utility
Utilitarian.
aspect. You know, you make plates as a potter, or you make sculpture as an artist. It might be the same material, but certainly what these women were doing was a craft. They elevated it to an upper level, but it still may or may not be art. And I do think that the crafts are always they always are diminished when compared to the fine arts. But the skill is the same. It just, they frequently have different purposes. And one of the criticisms I read about the book and the women and so forth did move along those lines of, why in the world aren't these women considered artists? Well, they're not. For one thing, they're not doing their own work,
Right.
designs and so forth. But that is sort of a constant play in the difference between craft and art, and when does one become the other. And certainly Miriam became an artist, but it was built on her craft
Design.
career. It's just, you know, it is sort of an interesting, you can find a few other mentions of it that kind of thread throughout the book, but you know, I don't know that it's a major theme. It just is a little undertone of what these women were doing.
She became the designer, and then Heather became the author. She was going to be an author, so,
Writer,
and they kept elevating. She went from journalist to author.
Mhm.
How
What
did
are you
she,
going to say?
How did she get enough money to spare to buy this business?
Which purchase?
The main character, she bought a business, and I don't know how she
Oh,
magically did that.
the art shop?
Yeah.
Oh,
I don't know that
They
it
didn't
says.
say. They just.
I know, but it's kind of weird, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
Maybe
single
it's
mother, you
rather-
don't just, it just doesn't
Yeah.
magically come your way.
Right, rather poor coming from
Yeah.
Long
England.
story.
Yeah,
Just a question.
Yeah,
Yeah.
They left out a few.
Yeah, some gaps between 47 and 2016.
So Miriam's panels that she had,
Yeah,
are those real at all? Because I was really having trouble imagining what those. look
right, those were a little harder to picture, huh? Did you look it up?
There is a different woman who has done panels
Oh.
based on the time when the Polish people were taken to or confined in an area, in one
Warsaw
area.
Ghetto.
What is
The
it?
Warsaw Ghetto?
Well, they're called leave, there's something, there's a name, something leave. Our other Jane might, might know about it. And she created these fabric panels with old photographs, but then superimposed with,
Where are they?
I have to, if you look here, I'll get. While you're talking, go ahead. Speak among yourselves.
That's fascinating.
They were at the corner of the pass. I don't know if they still are.
Oh, really? In Sister Bay? Yeah.
Yes, they were in the machine shed on the wall. I don't know if they still are there. They were gone for a while.
Oh, interesting. Huh.
Local panels.
So we talked a little bit about how the story goes back and forth between characters and time. Did you find the Heather more modern story, was that as compelling as the earlier story of Anne and Miriam? Or was that
No.
harder to?
No,
No.
I think in most of the books just flip back and forth.
Yeah.
The modern person is not quite as interesting as
Well,
the historical person.
well,
Oh, she didn't really have any hardship. She lost her job, you know, but I mean, that's not like not having enough food to eat and, you know, those kind of
Right,
things.
right.
And her family was there and she had enough money to get to Europe, obviously, you know, kind of thing. So, yeah, her story wasn't, but on the other hand, she was the instigator about finding out about this. Yeah.
She was
And-
sad that
and-
she never
yeah.
knew anything about
And
it.
how many of us have relatives that we don't know things
Mhm,
about them and we wish
Yes.
before they had died that we had asked a few more questions or that they had shared more
Sure.
with us.
And she kind of should, and yet the mother.
Right. Well, yeah, Anne's daughter seemed to know.
Yes. Go ahead.
Speak, shadow person, speak.
Linda, were you gonna say something more?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I was just saying that how something that seemed a little bit implausible was that, you know, whenever Heather would ask her mother if she knew anything about her grandmother, she seemed to know absolutely zero.
That, I agree with that. How could
Yeah.
you know nothing? How could you?
Right, right.
How about your own mother? I believe we don't always, as much as would like, to the point somebody just made about our grandmothers. I wish I'd asked so many more questions, but her mother didn't know anything about her own mother? I mean, was there no curiosity?
Right.
I think
Right.
that that Nan or Anne or Nana would kept saying, I don't want to talk about it. They kept thinking it was traumatic for her and they didn't want to push it and hurt her. And she was very unhappy about talking, or she changed the subject, or she said, let's not spoil the day by talking about those sad things. And then they would just let it go. You
She'd
get
have
into
to
a
be
pattern.
really good to tuck all that away for so long and not have people ask.
Yeah.
But I don't
Yeah.
think that's
I
totally
mean,
unusual. I mean, I
yeah.
don't think I can't tell you much about my mother either.
Yeah.
She, you know, didn't want to talk about anything particularly. So, no, I think there's a lot of, especially anyone who's had anything traumatic,
Yeah,
you know, whether it's, you know, the Vietnam vet that wants to tell you anything about what happened.
Yeah.
No.
Right.
But World War II.
Oh, God.
Yeah,
My dad would
nobody.
never.
No, my dad never would have
He's a
said.
paratrooper.
Yeah. Yeah, but they didn't talk about it. No.
And if anything tragic, I think happens to the family, I think They want to hide it. You know, you really don't, you don't want to let the whole world know about it. It's personal. It's not, talk about. So
I didn't have any trouble with that aspect. I knew virtually nothing about my parents. But it, in terms of a lot of personal stories and so forth, the part I didn't like, and I thought it was just too easy a way to wrap up the book. I think the contemporary characters frequently in these narratives are mostly just a hook or a way back through, so they're not fully developed. But what I really didn't like was I just did not like the fact that she was going to end up with Miriam's son. What's his name, Daniel? Or Charles. I thought that just really
romancing.
I thought it was sweet.
It was Miriam's grandson. It was her grandson.
Yeah.
right. I just thought it was needlessly pat. It just one wrapped up too many times, and I just thought in many ways it absolutely it didn't ruin the book, but I thought it diminished the effort put forth by the author to present these people through trauma. And then you have this light rom-com business going on. I just thought it was it not only unnecessary, I think they could have developed a relationship that was slower moving forward if they chose to, but I do think they could have done some exploring on their own about these about the grandparents. I just really thought it didn't, as I said, it didn't ruin the book, but I just really was hugely disappointed in such a pat, superficial ending.
Clearly, you've never worked in book marketing, Jane. No, I mean, I'm sure it's dollars and cents and selling more books. You put a little something in there that makes it a good beach read, and you'll get people to learn something about history that might not have picked up the book otherwise. So it's always a trade-off of, it's not just making, I'm not such a cynic that I think it's just about dollars and cents. I think it's getting more people to read the book and read the more important ideas, too, is that you have to something you're more familiar with.
Right. I do think it was because she had no other way to wrap it up. I think she took the easy way out, rather than continue that thread or figure out how to. Sometimes I think the double narrative is a way not to have to develop characters so carefully, because you're inserting a whole lot more plot, and your characters come in and you don't need to treat them as deeply because they're not as they're not in your face all the time. I do think it was just. I don't like the dual narrative anyway, but I just felt that it was tacked on. It was like, time to wrap this up, folks.
Yeah. Well, and from
on the good side, I thought that the pacing was done well. It was very important to me. I mean, there wasn't a lot of, sometimes when they're bouncing back and forth in time and the different characters are speaking, it's all internal dialogue, and I just want them to move the plot along. And I thought that the pacing was good.
Anybody, I listened to it on Audible, on an Audible book. Did anybody else listen to it on Audible? The actress who did it was fabulous. She did all of the voices and all of the accents. And I don't think I would have picked that up off the page. So I think maybe it made it more fun for me. And I was more forgiving of things that, like Jane's criticizing. I don't watch the Hallmark movies either. So, the Hallmark movie aspect of it didn't interest me at all. But having her do all of the voices and all of the regional accents, and every single embroiderer came from a different place.
Right.
And it was fabulous, her reading of it. So that made it really fun for me. So I highly recommend listening to some of these books on audio, because I just did The Water Dancer, Ta-Nehisi Coates' latest book, and it was read by an actor called Joe Morton. I don't know if you're familiar with his work, but he's amazing, and he did all of the voices. Not mimicking, not trying to sound like a woman or anything, but just enough, subtly enough that you could. In the dialogues, you just felt like I felt like when I finished listening to it, And as with this book, that I had watched a movie. It was so vivid in my mind because of the actors that I felt like I had already seen the film. So yeah, so it's fun. I highly recommend audiobooks.
So Anne spent so much time just hiding the past. Why do you think she gives Heather the embroidery swatches?
Didn't she give them to Heather after she had
Left them for her,
Right,
yeah.
they were
Yeah.
more-
So she must, I'm guessing when she went to the exhibit, and saw that she was remembered. She had been remembered in Miriam's panel.
Mhm.
And maybe that made her feel like, maybe these really are important. I should let my relatives and her granddaughter, who she loved so dearly, know about this part of my life after I'm gone.
Right.
She didn't want to
talk about it
discuss,
and
right,
face
she
it,
didn't
yeah.
want to discuss it, but she wanted her to know about it. And knew her granddaughter well enough to know her granddaughter would probably try and find out.
Right, get the journalistic streak to.
Yes.
To dig into it.
Yeah. My guess.
No, I agree.
I don't remember how long in advance she'd written for Heather on the samples. Because what I was about to say is, I think very often people, I hope I'm not late in my life yet, but I think very often people late in life don't want to regret, that they didn't divulge more, that they didn't share more. And Nana and Heather had such a close relationship, or Nana and Heather, that, and somebody said this earlier, maybe after seeing that she was represented in Miriam's work, she didn't really want her part in all of it to die. And so that's how she decided to handle it. I don't know.
It says here that she had never shown them to her daughter when they would have provoked questions she couldn't, even now, even after a half a century, bear to answer. She would leave them to Heather. So she wasn't going to leave to anybody who could ask her any questions while she was still alive.
Mhm.
She could have left them to the daughter, I suppose, but she left them to Heather instead. So
I would just like to support Jane in that I thought the ending was really cheesy. And not, to me, not, this author's a scholar. I don't read Janet Daly and Mary Higgins Clark, and I just haven't. I don't mean to make that sound snobby, but I just typically don't read those. And I felt like, oh, come on, you're a better writer than this, and you know more than this. And doesn't she have a PhD in something interesting? And so, and I understand, Jamie, I have never been in book publishing or marketing, so that's true. But it's kind of like, oh, really?
Has anyone read her Good Night from London or anything else from her? No.
Sorry?
Has anyone read anything else by Jennifer Robson? Or would you?
Yeah.
Maybe.
I would.
Got some maybes here. Yeah, you would.
I would. I'd try a second one and see.
where I learned some new vocabulary, or it's written so beautifully, like I want to just write that part down, and none of that in this book.
None of
It was a good story. I enjoyed reading it, but in terms of how the things were expressed, I didn't think she did a great job of, making it really a beautiful expression. And certainly there weren't many words that I needed to look up. So it was a fun read, but not an educational fun read like some of our books have been.
Right.
Where I take copious notes and I'm underlining everything,
Well, I think something else that we're all aware of in our reading lives is sometimes how, for example, I reacted, I think, even more positively to this book than I might have otherwise because of the book I had just read for the Oaks new book club, which is The Women of Copper County.
Oh.
And those lives seemed even more dire. You know, I mean, it was about the copper miners in the UP.
Right.
And I wound up liking it pretty well by the end, but it was at the beginning a slog for me. So this seemed very refreshing in comparison.
Mhm, mhm.
You know how that happens with everybody probably, right? The timing of the book.
Sure.
Yeah, and we've kind of read some heavier ones, and so it was kind of nice to have something that was an enjoyable read too. Yeah.
Enjoyable, but not Mary Higgins Clark. I mean, it really
Right,
wasn't bad.
right. Yeah, yeah. So in general, did we like this? Is it something we would recommend to anyone, or?
Yeah, I liked it.
Mhm.
I liked it.
I did recommend
I
it to a
liked it.
couple people, actually.
Yep.
Yeah. So way to go, Tracy.
I believe it was Marcia that recommended this, and she's not here, but.
Oh.
Way to go, Marcia. Wherever you are. That's
Any
good.
comments people haven't gotten in yet? Want to?
Just that it reminded me, if you watch the royal weddings and stuff, which I unfortunately do, and all the extra shows that they have about, they'll go to a hat maker, they'll go to a glove maker, they'll go to the military uniform maker, and they talk to all these people about who have establishments that are hundreds of years old, and it reminded me of that, so I like that.
So now in those more contemporary interviews, are they only interviewing like the designers and the main people, or do they?
Some of the crafts people, but they're upper level.
Okay.
The hat's always fascinating.
Oh, don't they love hats?
Yes.
I've never seen anything.
We Americans are never, I mean, our mother's
I love that they call the hats that they wear now fascinators.
Yes.
Isn't that a fun term? And they're so odd. They're just so odd.
They're fascinating.
Yes.
Fascinating, yes.
Fascinating.
We had a friend get married 3 years ago now, and we all got together and said, let's all get fascinators. So it was fantastic, because we had so much fun.
Where did you get them?
Some people ordered them, some people made them,
Yeah.
which was
Well,
fun to see.
Look what people do for the Kentucky Derby.
Right?
Right. Crazy. Crazy.
Yeah.
Well, next time we will meet, whether it's here or inside, will be determined, but we will still continue the virtual option as well. Stranger in the Woods, Imaginary Story of the Last True Hermit by Michael Finkel. I'm sure you can't see that.
It's called Stranger in the Woods by Michael Finkel.
Yes, yes.
Can I ask you people that are online to put a light in front of you so that you really have a face instead of just a shadow? It's strange.
Some of you are a little hard to see. You probably can't see us very well.
That would be on July 7th, is that right?
It is, yes, yes. So by then we'll be past 4th of July and all the craziness in Bailey's Harbor.
Yeah. Let those people go.
Yeah.
Somebody said to me, what do you think you were?
Yeah. I'll have to check it out to you, but
So, you know.
or I can.
But yeah, this week. Covered. Oh, yeah.
I'll check it in when I.
Well, what's nice about the July book, the July book is easy to read. It's not a heavy read. There's not a lot of themes. There's things to think about, but you know, it'll be good if you have company over the 4th of July. You should be able to, I finished it in no time.
Good,
You
good.
should be able to, it's not going to take up all your time.
Well, thank you all for coming. Thank you, those of you online, and sorry, I know this was a bit awkward here and there, but we'll work at it, and thank you all for being here.
I love this
Good
group.
job.
I'm so
Good
glad I
job.
found you all.
Bye.
Bye. See you next month.
And I can see the